everybody, and welcome back to the Wire Barn. I'm Maddie, and today we're going to be talking about our wire calculator, everything you need to know about it, and how to use it. So let's get into it. So what are wire calculators for? Well, they are used to calculate the recommended wire size or gauge for an application. In order to get exactly what you're looking for, there are a few things that you need to know so you can enter them into the wire calculator. You will need to enter the total length of wire and the amount of current that will be going through this new wiring. You will also need to enter the input or source voltage. For most automotive applications, this is typically 13.8 volts DC. It could be higher, but it also could be lower, especially on antiques. 6 volts was usually a very common voltage for older antique cars. The calculator covers 6 volts, 12 volts, 13.8 volts, 18 volts, and 24 volt input voltages. It is important to note that the total round trip length of wire harnesses needs to be used in the calculation. If you're using one wire for positive and the other one for negative, then you need to add both wire lengths together. Some applications utilize the frame or chassis for the ground, thereby eliminating most, if not all, of the need for a wire on the negative or return side of the circuit. Now let's get into some pros and cons of using the frame or chassis as ground. Starting with pros, wiring is shorter, often about half the length, since the return path is through the frame. Also, since the wire is shorter, you can get away with a smaller gauge. This means both a cost and weight savings, and who doesn't love that? Now into the cons. Metal frames usually corrode, and the connections to the frame need to be cleaned periodically. Sometimes the corrosion is severe enough to prevent the circuit from working properly. In the case of a trailer light, this can mean you can end up stranded on the road with no functional trailer lights. Another thing, it can pose as a safety risk if any critical circuits are wired using the chassis as ground. Circuits such as fuel pumps, ignition systems should never be wired in this fashion. Anything critical should have individual wires for both positive and negative connections. Now that we know a little bit about the wire calculator, let's get into how to actually use one for an application. Alright, so as you can see, we have our first example that we're using for wiring LED trailer lights. For this example, we're using 2 wires for both positive and negative. So the first thing we're going to want to do is enter our input voltage. So on our example, we can see it says 13.8 VDC, so we can put voltage as 13.8. Next, we have to enter our total current draw, or the circuit amperage. So on our example, it says 5 amps, so we enter 5. Then we enter our total wire run, or the total wire length. So for our example, it says 40 feet, so we can enter 40. And then we enter our percent drop. For most automotive applications, 5% is a good drop to have, so we can enter 5 for this. And once we have everything filled out on here, we can scroll down and press calculate. And this will tell us what the appropriate wire gauge is to use for this application. So on the right side where it says size OK, wherever there's a check mark, those are acceptable wire gauges to use. Now moving on to our second example for wiring LED trailer lights. For this example, we're only using one positive wire that runs all the way to the lights, and we're using the chassis or frame as ground. So the first thing, again, we're going to want to do, enter our input voltage. This one is the same as last one, so we're entering 13.8 volts. Then we enter our total current draw, or the circuit amperage. Again, it's 5 amps for this example. Then we're going to enter our total wire run, or the total wire length. For this example, it's 23 feet, so we can enter 23. And we enter our 5% drop. Once all that's filled out, scroll all the way down and press calculate. And this will tell us the appropriate wire gauges to use for this application. Typically, we want to use the smallest wire with the check mark. So on here, it would be the 16 gauge wire where the check mark is, because these ones don't have check marks. These are the smallest ones. So you should also know that there are some disclaimers to this on the website. So please read the notes below the wire calculator, which are down here. The main exception is when there are multiple conductors in a single jacket or conduit. The calculator does not address this situation, and you need to size the wires considerably large, especially if they carry current at the same time. So if you have a wiring scenario where one larger wire splits off into two smaller gauge wires, you'll need to know what size wire to use for the supply circuit. For example, if you want to feed two 18 gauge wires with one larger supply wire, like the letter Y, you need to know what size wire is equivalent to two 18 gauge wires and the size the supply wire accordingly. And there we have it. One more thing before we go, I got the barn joke of the week for you. Are you ready? What are goosebumps for? To slow the geese down. Let me know if you laughed, because that was pretty funny. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful. If you did, make sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below on what you want us to talk about in future videos. And lastly, make sure to check out wirebarn.com to use our wire calculator and for all your wiring needs. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye!